A couple months ago, Atezr sent me out their P10 10-watt combo set laser engraving machine. This machine comes with a small screen, so you don't need to attach it to your computer. You can also just transfer the files with a small SD card. And in this case, since it is the combo set, it also comes with the optional roller and air assist. The roller itself I will not be using, but it does have the feet for it to be used so that the laser set itself will be a lot higher. I'm just mounting it to the standard lower set just to use it for the regular height material that I will be cutting on and not for the roller itself. The small screen does come in very handy as it can control the machine without being connected to a computer directly or having your laptop next to it, but that is all up to personal preference. I myself like to have the option to not have the computer next to it, so if the building burns down, at least I still have my computer. Now this is a 10-watt laser, and due to the air assist, it does cut a lot cleaner and a lot thicker materials, even though the laser itself is not the strongest version out there. After about 30 to 45 minutes of assembly, the machine was completely assembled and I fired it up for the first time, doing an initial test cut to see if it was calibrated correctly. It did need a little bit of tweaking. Some of the belts needed to be tensioned a little more, and after that was completed, I could move on to my first cuts after I designed them. Now this first one is just the box that I'm going to be putting the small diorama in that you've seen a couple of times before, nothing special, and this one is the start of the diorama itself. I will be making a small street side diorama with a house front or something like that, a bit of a street, a sidewalk, and some additional accessories on there, and those are all cut out of different types of MDF, plywood, and even some acrylic as well for some other details later on. Now these are all custom designed by me, so there are some imperfections there. I'm not a professional designer by any means, not even close. I'm probably not even to be called an amateur designer, as I'm below that level, but I did manage to make a little bit of a cool design, if I might say so myself. But then again, I'm probably a bit biased over my own capabilities and my own design, so not sure if that counts. So the first thing you see here is a small box that will go into the Hobby Zone desktop organizers. In this case, they are display cases. I've previously glued it to the sidewalls, but that means it's not removable. So I decided just to make small boxes so I can just interchange them if I want to use something else or display another diorama I've made. I've also done a bit of a street and sidewalk and also some manhole covers that are done with my own logo just for fun, that fit in there nicely, and of course the front fascia of the house as well. The low section will be a sort of spackled finish, and the top section will be bricks, as you can see, and then some trim pieces to make it a bit thicker and more three-dimensional have also been cut out to be glued onto it later. But you can also just glue them on already if you want to, but since I'm going to be painting some of them in different colors for the cleanliness of the build, I decided to glue some later and some could just be glued on straight away. Now for the sidewalk piece, there is a pretty straight edge that is cut with the laser cutter, and that needs to be rounded off a little bit, and also the panel lines aren't running through all the way, so those need to be cut out as well after the rounding off had been completed. I could then put my attention to the front fascia of the house, gluing a couple of those trim pieces on already, as these will all be painted in the same white, so I can glue them on straight away as they will have the same color and the same finish, and the top section for the bricks will be masked off, or the lower half will be masked off in order to paint the top section. Now for the doors, I decided to go with a pretty big, thick double door. I cut out the design in the door itself and then cut out the small tiles to add a bit of dimension and thickness or even girth to the door. Those were glued on later with a bit of wood glue, and then I could move on to letting that cure, and in the meantime move on to painting the street and the sidewalk. First of all, I'm just going to go over it with the airbrush and some gray base tones. The sidewalk I wanted to have a little bit of a lighter gray, and the street section I wanted to be a bit of a darker gray and also a misty brown effect on top of it, and that will all be highlighted even further. As this was simply just the base, I decided to go with a couple of different colors on the different tiles, as not all of them are exactly the same color in real life. So I'm just going over them with a couple different tones of gray in order to achieve a 50 Shades of Grey sidewalk effect. This is just the first stage. At this point it probably looks really horrible. I thought so myself as well, but that will be fixed a bit later on in the video after I paint a couple more shades of gray onto the sidewalk. So the first shade of gray was finished with the airbrush, the second was brushed on, and the third was brushed on as well. And then I moved on to blending it all together. I'm doing this with one of the gray tones that I've used to paint the tiles, but then just dabbing it on with a small sponge just to blend them a bit and not fully cover them in paint and removing the effect. While that was drying, I moved on to the street section, doing pretty much the same thing, but then going over the gray with the brownish brush that I've sprayed on earlier, and then doing a couple of different tones of brown and blending it all together with a black just to tone it all down and make it a lot smoother of a transition and not as big of a color difference. For the small manhole covers, I painted them black first, then dry brushed some silver on top of it really lightly, and also some rust brown to tone it down again a little bit and make it look a little bit more like metal. And once that was completely dried, I could move on to gluing all those pieces together and facing my attention to the front fascia of the house. So the lower half, or the ground floor, was painted in white first. That was then masked off for the brown to be painted on the first floor. And then after painting the white, the surface looked a bit too much like the wood, as it is just wood painted white, so that should have been pretty obvious before I started doing this. But I didn't really think it would be this visible after painting, yet it was, so I added a bit of a wood filler on top of it, let that cure, sanded it smooth, removed most of that texture, and then applied a couple more coats of white to blend it back in together. And in the meantime, as you can see, I've already moved on to the top half, or the first floor, painting different colors on all of the stones or bricks, and then again blending them together with a different tone of brown. With most of the painting now completed, I could move on to gluing it onto the backing plate and also adding a couple of those additional pieces that I've prepared earlier. Some of the other pieces still need to be painted, and again those were painted in the same white, just for the trim around the windows and the detail area in front of the windows with a sort of smaller mesh grid type of thing that I have no clue what to call, but you'll see that a bit later. The door itself was painted in a gloss black. For the glass, I decided to go with some black acrylic. This is just a gloss black to simulate a sort of glass look, but then with nothing behind it, as this is just the front fascia of the house and there's no details on the back side. After putting it in place, it came up a bit too far, so I had to cut out the backing so that it would lay down a little bit deeper, and the additional detail piece that I wanted to put on top of the glass would now sit a little bit deeper than the actual window frame as well, so that looked a little better in my opinion, as it sort of had that sunken in look, as it literally is sunken in, so it kind of should have that look if it actually is. Right, moving on. So at this point, stage 1 of the build is completed, and initially I thought that this would pretty much be it. Though after assembling it, putting some cars in front of it, I figured it was missing a little bit, so I decided to add even more details, but then not with the laser cutter, but simply with a 3D printer. So I just mocked it up with a couple of 1/43rd scale cars, different colors, different cars, just to see how it would look. And overall I was really satisfied, but again I thought it was missing a little, so I decided to add more parts to it. I printed a phone booth, some lamp posts or street lights, and also a small fire hydrant. These were all primed and then painted in various different colors. The phone booth was first painted black for the glass, then to be masked off, and then later to be painted red. The clear parts for the street lights were painted in a bit of a clear yellow. The posts for the street lights were painted in British Racing Green, and then after that was completed and cured, I could move on to masking the phone booth for all of the window areas to remain black and the rest of the booth to then be primed white and painted red. So I could just paint the red over the black, but it would take a lot more coats to fully cover and it wouldn't be as bright as I want it to be. So first a layer of primer in white was applied, and then a couple coats of red were done as well. Once the red was applied and cured, I could carefully remove all of the masking tape, revealing the black paint underneath. That again will sort of simulate windows, as this one is fully filled with resin on the inside, and I could then add a gloss clear coat on top. I'm just going to go for Tamiya LP9. This is their lacquer 1K clear. It will not dry super glossy, but that is exactly the finish that I'm after, as a lot of these pieces in real life have a lot of orange peel on them and not a super smooth finish, as I think most of them are painted with a brush and a roller and not actually painted. Maybe the new ones in the factory are painted, but later on when they are maintained and repainted, I don't think they are spray painted. At least in my country they are not, and close up they look pretty horrible. So this is a pretty good finish in my opinion for a small diorama, and also a bit fitting with the style. The phone booth and fire hydrant were put in place, and then also the lamp posts were assembled. First the base was put down, then a small piece underneath the glass was put on, the glass itself, and then the top hat to finish it all off. Now these are hollow in the inside, so when I do another diorama I plan to add some lights to it, and I could print these again if I do a similar style or would need these in that diorama. That is a pretty fun detail to add, but that again is for the future. I'm building this up slowly, and I already think that these dioramas are looking better and better every time I try it, and I'm really happy with what is coming out of my hands. And with that, this one is finished as well. It is a 1/43 scale diorama, specifically to display some of my 1/43 scale car collection. I have many, and I really like to display them and look at them, and these small dioramas are a really fun way of doing that outside of my regular display cabinet. If you like this type of build and usage of these lasers, please leave a comment down below to let me know that you actually enjoy these videos, and if you have any other ideas for future dioramas to add to my collection, I would really appreciate it. If you are interested in purchasing the items that I've used in this video, there will be links below, and also I will be leaving links to Atezr for their P10 10-watt laser engraver if you're interested, or just check out some of the other products they offer. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.